few more minutes, get more of our participants in, and then we will start. Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know we'll have a few more people join us, but in the interest of time and trying to stick to our schedule and making our meetings as hearty and robust as possible, just want to remind you all of what our agenda is for the evening. I will facilitate the conversation, keep us on track. So for those of us who like to be long-winded, I will cut you off and move us along so that we can get through our agenda on time. But ultimately, I just wanted to welcome you all to our, the second quarter of the current 22 year for the Neighborhood Leaders Quarterly Meeting. We'll start off with our city manager, Mr. Rogers, giving some remarks to all of you, and then we will move right into the presentation that we have arranged for you from our budget director, Chrissy Hamill.
Thank you, Sam. I just wanted to say good evening to everyone, and thanks for spending time with us. I found my first meeting with you very insightful and very constructive, and learned a lot from that meeting. I think the process of you providing questions and us providing answers is a way to make the most efficient use of our time. We've done that this time. You've had some great questions, and hopefully our answers are as clear as they can be based on what we know now. I noted to Sam earlier that there were some answers that I figure they may not be very happy with, because we're having some challenges with personnel and recruitment, et cetera, and that's impacting our productivity. But we are working our way out of that situation, and will continue to do so in the coming months, so that we can be even more responsive to your questions and your concerns. So thank you for being here this evening, and let's kick it over to Chrissy Hamill for a budget presentation.
Good evening. I'm going to share my screen.
And I will just share with everyone a reminder, the meeting is being recorded. We will make sure all future meetings are recorded and available on the city's website.
Can you all see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, So I was asked to give a presentation to help explain the
Actually,
basic
Chrissy,
budget.
Chrissy, we're seeing your notes page. You might want to flip the display.
Okay. I'm also, hold on just a second. How about that?
Field notes.
Let me
There
try.
you go. There you go.
Okay, is it working?
Yeah.
Now it's gone.
Let me
You had it.
reshare. I'm in the office and when I have all these screens, gets confusing. So let me try this again. How about that?
There you go.
There you go.
Okay, so hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll have a little bit better understanding of how the city is financed, the dynamics of our expenditures, how our process and our deliberations of the budget work, and also a general understanding of the purpose of capital budgeting and our practices. What we don't want to do with the budget is we don't want to be in a situation like this. We don't want people coming to us and we say, don't do this because we don't have any money. We want to try to be thoughtful, be prepared, and be proactive with our budget. So what does this office do? We promote long-term fiscal integrity of the city and help ensure that council's long-term vision areas are being met. The way that we do that is we develop an annual budget and a 5-year CIP program. We analyze financial information and trends. We address policy issues related to the budget, city finance, and organizational performance and quality initiatives. We also work with departments to create performance plans, continuous process improvement initiatives, some modeling, and some organizational assessments. This piece here, we have been working under the same strategic plan for a while. Council will be working to update that and we'll be doing more with that. So right now, this is kind of taking a little bit of a backseat, but we do pay attention to the existing current strategic plan when we're making decisions. How is the city's general fund financed? Largely by taxes. And we have some breakout of some of the bigger things, the city county revenue sharing. We have charges for services, intergovernmental revenue, which includes state, federal, UVA, the county, not things other than revenue sharing would be in that, licenses and permits. And then we have transfers from other funds, carryover funds, and miscellaneous revenue. And you can see the pieces of that. Again, the largest percentage of that being tax revenue. Um, 67.8% of the general fund revenue comes from 5 tax sources. That's the real estate taxes, the city county revenue sharing, the sales and use taxes, meals taxes, and business license taxes. So if we take a look at real estate tax, again, that's the tax that's paid on the assessed value of homes and businesses, apartments, apartment complexes. It's the largest source of city revenue. It makes up 49.9% of the general budget for FY23. The rate in 23, as you know, council just adopted a penny increase on that. So we're now at 96 cents per hundred. And the way that this revenue changes is we can have either natural growth or decline in reassessment values of property or tax rate changes. So for FY23, that budget is $89.5 million. The city county revenue sharing was based on a 1982 agreement between the city and the county. It basically said that the city could not annex any further property in the county, and the county contributes 1/10 or 1% of the total assessed property values from the prior fiscal year. We split those funds between operating and capital and the facilities repair fund in the city budget. We try to dedicate those to more of one-time uses as opposed to ongoing recurring operating types of things. For FY '23, that accounts for $15.5 million in the budget. Sales and use tax accounts for about 6.5% of the general fund budget. That's taxed on things that you purchase. That rate is 5.3 for general sales and 2.5 on non-prepared goods. That rate is changing, I believe, with a law that's been passed in the General Assembly. I'm not exactly sure, and I meant to update this honestly before this presentation. I forgot this bullet was on here. I believe that goes to 1.5 for non-prepared foods. But for FY '23, we're estimating $13.9 million in the '23 budget. Meals tax equates for 7.8% of the total budget. That tax is assessed on prepared foods, beverages from restaurants, and grocery stores that serve prepared foods. The rate right now is 11.8%. That's 6.5% for meals and the 5.3% sales tax. For FY '23, council increased this tax rate from 6% to 6.5%. And we dedicate the equivalent of 1 cent to the debt service fund to help buy down some of our debt payment. So for FY '23, the meals tax total budget is $16.6 million. Business and professional license, this equates for about 4.1% of the city budget. It is the paid on the gross receipts for the privilege of doing business within a locality. All businesses located in the city of Charlottesville are required to obtain a business license. And for FY '23, this amounts to $8.7 million in the budget. So as I mentioned before, these 5 sources represent 67.8% of the total general fund budget. And you can see the change in those and this is the change from '22 to '23. COVID has had quite an impact, as you can see, which is generating some of this change. So that's how the money we collect, how are we spending it? So when we look at the budget each year, we try to look at the things that are what we term as expenditure stresses. So we start with what are our requirements and expectations. Those two things, as we know, grow much faster than local revenues can generally support them. So there are always hard decisions to make during the budget process. Many local expenses are not at the discretion of the local elected body. So those are things that we have to fund first. They include things such as unfunded mandates, environmental requirement, constitutional officers, jails, social services, mental health and youth residential placement. And then there are also council priorities and just core service needs that we have to fund, and they always compete with the fun new things that we generally want to do as well. Contribution to schools is also another big expense. It is the largest expense after personnel in the city's budget. The elected school boards have no taxing authority, but make all budget decisions. And they do make their own budget decisions on behalf of school operations. So council approves their budget, but it's just a budget that's presented to them. The school board actually makes their own decisions on the budget. Their funding comes from local government as well as state and federal governments. In FY '23, the schools will receive just under $63 million from the city as the local contribution. That's an increase of $4.2 million over FY '22. In addition, there is $7.1 million in FY '23 in capital funding for the schools. And our 5-year plan includes just over $82 million over the next 5 years, which is includes the $68.8 million Beaufort School renovation or reconfiguration. The city pays the debt service for all city school capital projects that are bonded. And as of right now, approximately 20% of the city's debt service payment is for school projects. So that's both, that's for older things that have been paid. So that's for existing debt service. So what is a capital? Moving on, that's kind of the operations. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to stop or interrupt. If not, I'll just keep moving along. We're going to transition from the operating budget to the capital improvement program. What is that? It's a 5-year plan. It generally includes projects that cost $50,000 or more with a life of 5 years or more. Some examples are school renovations. We have affordable housing initiatives in there, city building improvements, parks and landscape improvements, neighborhood improvements, street and sidewalk improvements. Again, just like the operating budget, the challenge here is that there always are competing needs. We have aging infrastructure, and these needs and funding requirements always exceed our revenues. For FY23, the general fund is contributing $8.7 million to the capital project fund for what we term PAYGO, which means that's cash that's going into the CIP that we will be using for projects. We do have a financial policy that requires that a minimum of 3% of the total general fund budget must go to the CIP. Pay and benefits, employee compensation and cost of benefits increases. That includes base salary increases, retirement and health insurance, and premium increases. We desire to keep salaries and benefits competitive. For FY23, the budget includes a 3% cost of living increase for active city employees. It also includes a 2% cost of living increase for retirees in the city's pension plan. Nonprofit agencies, that's another funding stream in the city's operating budget. The nonprofits, we fund programs that the city does not directly provide. They help enhance city services and fill service gaps. Largely areas of human services, public safety, education, arts and culture, affordable housing, youth and families, and environmental efforts are funded through those agencies. There's an intensive process to evaluate those programs and those funding requests. It's known as the Vibrant Community Funding Process. And for FY 2023, total contributions of $15.7 million are going to agencies. The Vibrant Community Process is a competitive process that agencies apply for. That was about $2.5 million in funding. The rest are funded through agencies that are contractual, such as the jails, the libraries, SPCA, those kinds of things that are funded through MOUs or regional agreements that the city has. Strategic priorities and initiatives. Again, this should have been updated. The FY, this whole slide should have been deleted. I apologize. We do actually fund strategic priorities and initiatives. If you look in the budget book, that is noted throughout the budget book, which priorities are being funded. There were no new police officers funded in 23. We did in the last year's budget, we have new fire EMS positions that were funded through a SAFER grant. And there were several other things that we funded. Again, I apologize for the slide not being updated. We also have to look at cost saving measures. And so some of the things that we've done over time, We've slowed down capital budget and facilities maintenance projects, especially during COVID. We actually froze all cash funded projects and put that money into a reserve. It turned out we didn't need it. And so as part of the year-end process for 21, we put that back into the CIP. We look for savings in fuel and vehicle maintenance, although there's not much savings in fuel these days. We try to eliminate vacant positions when possible. We look for healthcare costs. We try to find energy efficiency measures, but we also try to maintain the same level of service with in looking for these cost saving measures. And then we try to, with the agency review process, prioritize those dollars in the way that that they're scored. So the budget deliberation process, it truly is a year-round process. Revenues and expenditures are tracked and updated monthly. There's a revenue team that meets monthly. That revenue team includes the city manager's office, the deputy city managers, the city manager. It includes the budget office, our commissioner of revenue, our treasurer, our director of finance, and our economic development director. This team did a ton of work during COVID and was directly a big lifesaver and helped us sort of maneuver through COVID. We were able to update those projections on a monthly basis and make better decisions on that. We also go to council in December and we review budget guidelines and develop long-term forecast at that point. And we look for direction from council in terms for how we want to focus the budget. Again, as we know, funding requests, both from departments, from agencies, always exceed the amount of available revenue. So there is a budget review team, which basically looks at all of those requests. We try to determine which ones are important, what we can fund, what we can't fund, what can be deferred, what is less critical. We try to re-examine for efficiencies, and we also look for ways, if there are ways to increase revenue, either by grants, taxes, or other sources to fund those needs. Again, when we look at this, we have to balance those options against community priorities and also city council policy. We have to achieve a balanced budget recommendation, and that recommendation is submitted to council for review in late February, early March. During the month of March, council takes that budget, reviews it, modifies it, and then finally adopts it in April. So citizen input and processes, there are several sources for that. In the past, we've done citizen budget surveys. We've used community budget forums, which happened in March. We also have a series of budget work sessions and public hearings on the budget, again, throughout the month of March. City council, those budget work sessions happen in December, March, and April. The operating and capital budgets both must be adopted by council no later than April 15th, and that's per the city charter. If you check out our budget webpage at www.charlottesville.gov/budget, you'll find the current budget information, the FY23 adopted budget book will be posted shortly. Right now, just the proposed budget book is out there. We do have our new Budget Explorer, which contains line item budgets by departments as well as quarterly, and it also compares the 22 to 23 budget by line item on the Budget Explorer. The budget development information For work session materials and other things you can find there. You can also find archived budget documents going back to 2007. And there are also links to other budget resources such as the Vibrant Community Fund Report and also the 2018 National Citizen Survey, which is a little bit dated, but there's some good information in there as well. So I want to take a little bit deeper dive into the capital improvement program. Again, some of the things we want to talk about, and we've touched on briefly, is what is a capital project? What is a capital improvement program? What is a capital budget? Why do a 5-year plan? And how does the process work? So what is a capital project? It has to have an essential public purpose. It has a long useful life with usually a 5-year minimum. It has to be expensive. It's generally $50,000 or more, and it's non-recurring and non-operational, generally speaking. So what is a CIP project? School improvements, the comprehensive and strategic plan implementation, public safety equipment, parks and rec replacement and repair, transit projects, and transit projects being like the building, the downtown transit center, and buses also. The city matches funded out of the CIP. Some other examples include environmental projects, streets and sidewalks again, the recreation facility repair, affordable housing initiatives, and city infrastructure. So what is a CIP? It's a multi-year plan, 5 years, that forecasts spending and revenues for all anticipated projects. It should build on both the strategic and comprehensive plans. And it should address repair and maintenance of existing infrastructure as well as the development of new facilities. So why do we do a 5-year CIP plan? It helps provide a framework that involves citizens in defining future of the community. It reflects priorities of council and the city. It determines long-term cost of new growth, ensures even distribution of projects within different areas of the city, provides increased planning and coordination of projects, and can help encourage regionalism on projects such as with UVA in Albemarle County. A well-planned CIP is the means that ensures major expenditures are in line with both community expectations and values, anticipated growth, and financial capabilities. So the review process for a CIP, number one, should align with the strategic plan. Again, the strategic plan is intended to sort of serve as a roadmap for the city employees, council, and the public. It should help align the CIP and the allocation of the limited resources that go towards furthering those goals and objectives as well. So what are the criteria? We also look at true life cycle costing, which includes construction cost, the operational cost, the life cycle replacement cost, and also whether or not these projects actually generate revenue that help pay for themselves. This is a form. There's some pieces and parts that are left, so this is just sort of a snapshot. But when we are going through the CIP process, each project manager for any new project request will fill out a form that looks like this. So it's supposed to plan out the projected cost of the project, and then how we will pay for that. If there are other grants, if Albemarle County sharing, what the plan would be for funding. We also take a step further to look at projected operational cost, and then any projected revenues into the future. There are also things that they're required to, they're required to decide how that lines up with the strategic plan, as also they give a much more detailed explanation of the project. So the timeline for all of this is in September or October, we go out to the departments and they submit those requests to the budget office. In October and November, the CIP Budget Development Committee evaluates the projects and figures out how much money is available, and then makes recommendations to the city manager. In November and December, we present to the Planning Commission for feedback and approval on those projects. And in February, a proposed CIP budget gets presented to City Council. And then in April, council will formally adopt that along with the operating budget. So again, the challenges of the CIP are we always have more needs than available revenue. We have aging buildings and infrastructure. We have competing priorities. We have unanticipated emergencies that come up during the year. And there are lots of cost unknowns, inflation, cost of fuel, a low bidding environment. And I'm sorry, but that's it. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time. Here's my contact information. If you have any questions after this or think of anything, please feel free to reach out.
So if we could, if anyone who has questions, if you use the raise hand so that we could manage that process. Somebody's got a question. Oh, I see. Okay. Mr. Abrahamson, I see you.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. Much obliged. Now, definitely hope if you can answer this question, like I could describe it to my 12-year-old. One of the thing you repeated on is there's always more needs than funding. Inflation's going up. I understand that assessments increasing is one aspect that kind of sort of tracks inflation to increase revenues without adjusting the actual price tax per square foot. In the instance with the example that we just had with the school system where the community was actually advocating, there was advocation for additional taxation and increasing that revenue, and city council elected and the city manager's recommendation was to not. That's a separate topic, but in what circumstances does the community able to say we want to fund additional items, we want additional revenue raised above and beyond? How does that conversation occur?
So that conversation happens during the budget development process. There are public hearings on the tax rate, dedicated public hearings on those tax rates during the budget process, as well as work sessions. You're always available to email your counselor or counselors to advocate for those types of things. The way that process happens is throughout the public conversation regarding the budget.
Okay, so sorry, as a related note for that, sorry. Apparently I'm still on the clock at work. Because that is a finite pool, change my example a little bit for sidewalk improvements. It's one that comes up all the time. That keeps getting slapped down is there's not sufficient funds to meet all the needs in the city. Does that need to be a resident-led advocacy to increase that pot of money for that work? Or can we advocate that is it city staff that needs to amplify that, or does that have to go to council?
So council has to approve all tax changes.
Mhm.
And those are and council ultimately sets the priority. Certainly the city manager sets forth a proposed budget. And as you always have an opportunity to advocate, it's ultimately a choice for both the city manager and what they put in the proposed budget, and then ultimately council in terms of what they decide. I'm not really answering your question, but I'm not sure that there's no way you can force it, because ultimately council has to vote for that.
Not trying to force it, but council definitely gets good information from its valuable staff. Just want to make sure people understand where to focus their comments. Last comment, and then I'll definitely release the floor. You outlined the process quite well. One of the comments that my colleague Jason Halbert has raised many times is transparency and informing. Mr. Rogers referred that this fall process was beginning to create greater transparency around this capital improvement plan. Is that still on the horizon to get better reporting throughout the process over the ranking?
So we are working on that. I'm Mr. Rogers. Please feel free to step in here.
Yeah.
We've not finished finalizing what that will look like.
Yeah, we are looking at a number of tools and processes that to make the system more open and transparent. I think that the budget tool that we have online now is one way to provide more information for residents who want to dig in and understand the budget and where we're spending our dollars more deeply. We are planning a citizen survey as well. That this is something that has been done in the past, and I think it's a good practice. It hasn't been done in recent years, and that citizen survey will give people an opportunity to sound off, if you will, on priorities and concerns about city government operation, and give us some direction in terms of what you think the priorities are. And we will listen to that, look at it, and as we're forming the budget and looking at the resources we have, we will shape the priorities around that and make recommendations to council.
Thank you very much for that.
Ethan Tate, I see your hand up.
Great, thank you, and thanks for the presentation. I'm curious about the evaluation criteria for the CIP process, and kind of with all of the conversations we've had at the city level over the last several years about equity, like what kind of an equity lens is put on those things as we're trying to figure out, which street gets a sidewalk or any other thing in that capital improvement plan. What role does equity play in making those decisions so that the most vulnerable neighborhoods are also heavily included?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And I'll also let Mr. Rogers and Sam jump in here. I think what's going on. For example, the last 2 or 3 years, we've not really had areas means to evaluate new projects on a lot of very specific criteria, simply because we were limited by what we were doing with COVID. And so many of sort of the recurring have to kinds of things, and because of some affordable housing dollars that were put into the CIP, we were kind of strapped in terms of how much new stuff we could add. Certainly the school project, in addition, that's a fairly sizable project that limits our ability to do that. And in saying that, this is the part where Sam might want to jump in. in terms of dollars and projects that are submitted for the CIP, like sidewalks and those types of things, they're budgeted more as a lump sum, and that falls back to the departments who are prioritizing their paving or sidewalks programs using different criteria that may not necessarily feed directly to the CIP. It's at a more micro level.
You want to jump in, Sam?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Rogers.
No, I was saying you jump in on that. That's your area.
Yeah, what I'll add for you there is we've been having more conversations internally about how to better utilize an equity lens in really prioritizing these projects. I wasn't here. I haven't been here long enough to say if it was done well in the past or not. So part of the exercise right now is to test what we can for what we have available in the way of notes as to how we form the list that we have today. Our Director of Public Works, Mr. Smalls, and I have been working vehemently on trying to get the VDOT portfolio better organized. And one of the things that he has brought up is making sure that we're utilizing an equity lens in selecting those projects for going forward. Because again, we don't necessarily know with confidence that it's been done the way we would all be excited about in the past. We might have just taken projects because they were easy to fit into schedules or we were working here to do something, so we just added something else to it, thereby missing a chance to really touch a neighborhood that hadn't gotten anything on the list in quite some time. We want to do better with that and intend to do better with that. I think that's what we're trying to figure out, how to put out the burning fires of the moment, and then we will get past that and then ultimately be able to operationalize it in a way that we can easily communicate it. Because I think that's what you all probably are expecting to hear from us, having been in the city that's been talking about equity for a good number of years now, post 2017, and not necessarily having that kind of put out in front for you to really digest. I think we have some work to do on that. And Stacey, if you wanted to add anything, I'll let you, but I'm just thinking that's where we are. James and I, even from a planning perspective, have talked about that as well, because it came up during the comp plan conversations that we need to be more out front with leading from that place of equity as a priority. And I think we still have some things that we need to work on to be able to put something in front of you all to even react to.
Yes, Sam, you pretty much nailed it. What we're doing with our VDOT projects and how we're trying to implement equity in that. There's the Office of Intermodal Planning grant that we just received, and we're looking at how we're going to prioritize some of our VDOT projects going forward. And then there's the three-pronged attack on how we plan to prioritize sidewalk projects with ADA and human rights, the transportation planner in NDS, and in our engineering section in Public Works, to be able to look at projects and prioritize them with that equity lens in mind. So you covered everything pretty much to the T, Sam.
And I will also add, I missed acknowledging my counterpart, Ms. Marshall, was our Deputy City Manager for Race, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, who actually, since she started here, just so that you all know, we've been trying to figure out how best to live what it is that we're talking about. Ashley is in every conversation. She does not just focus on her portfolio. She's all in my portfolio too. So she's in transit conversations, the same as Public Works and Parks and Rec conversations as well. We right now, she's going to be being pulled into the climate conversation because we want justice to be a part of that discussion. So there are definitely newer opportunities that will become more available with that deputy position actually being filled and being available to us. One of the more recent actions that we haven't announced fully yet, but the ADA coordinator is moving from Neighborhood Development Services to the Office of Equity and Inclusion, and that person will report to Ashley. So that will be to highlight the priority that we need to do better in our ADA work. And I'll let Ashley add more to that particular moment or anything else she wants to say.
Yeah, is she on? Oh, yeah, there you are. Yeah.
I've been here the whole time, thankfully. I'm very glad to join you all today. But one of the things I very much appreciate, both from my colleague, Mr. Sanders, as well as from our city manager, Mr. Rogers, is that equity is everywhere, and so I get to be everywhere. That is not always the case when a local government adds a DEI person to their portfolio. Sometimes they're regulated just to HR or to other areas, but my goal is to take a holistic look at our organization and not only see how we can make equity a part of our internal workings, but also part of our service provision. And Ms. Hamill has been very receptive to my asking of questions of how we can think about equity when we think about budgeting, because sometimes the answer is we just need to do this thing because, let's use an example, the sinkhole in hydraulic, it just needs to be fixed. It's a sinkhole. And maybe we need to defer resources there because we don't want anyone falling in the sinkhole no matter who you are. But then there are other opportunities where we can think about prioritization, or at least asking the questions in the room. And so I'm really thankful and excited that I'm in a place and space where I can ask the questions of, have we thought of who's not at the table? Have we thought of whose voice we haven't heard? Have we thought of how this maybe impacts? And DEI is pretty broad. Is that sign going to be in a separate language? Do we make sure that our website is ADA accessible? So all of those things are being thought about, and all of them ultimately do go back to Ms. Hamill and the budget, because in order for some of those things to get done, we do need dollars to do them. So I'm more than happy to be in any room and also take any specific DEI questions, but I would like to just share that it's been a privilege to work alongside Deputy City Manager Sanders and his operations side of the house, who is open to this person sitting in the room saying, hey, have we thought about this? And they pause and they think about it. I don't have to volunteer anyone. I don't have to force anyone. This is an amazing opportunity that I get to have.
Yeah. Let me just punctuate that to answer your first question. Do we think about it? I guess you can see the answer is yes. There is an equity and an inclusion filter in this organization about everything that we do. And it's going to continue to do it, to be that, and we're going to get better at it. And you're going to feel it even greater as we roll this out in the future.
Definitely stay tuned. This is the forum that we intend to roll out more of that type of review opportunities for you to see what it is that we're thinking about and proposing before we make some final decisions as well. All right, so I don't see any other hands. We'll continue with our agenda. James?
Sam, you have a hand.
Oh, okay. Hello, Ned Mickey. Go ahead.
Hi, and thanks for the presentation, and that really glad to hear about the equity lens that's getting applied to everything in the city these days. We're talking about the CIP though, and this being a neighborhood leaders meeting. I hope in your thought about the CIP process that you are going to think about how to directly include the neighborhoods and outreach to the neighborhoods on what our desires are for CIP. A few years ago, before the pandemic, you allowed us to submit CIP requests directly, and that was filtered into the process. And again, doesn't mean it's going to get funded, and looking at priorities across the city and that sort of thing. But at least it was an opportunity for the neighborhoods to be heard directly on projects that interested us. I note that back in 2000, as part of the comprehensive plan, the city actually did and this was a lot of work, set up meetings, multiple meetings in each neighborhood, and went through a whole thing about to find out what neighborhoods were interested in as far as projects and improvements in their neighborhoods. And then a report was produced to each neighborhood on their neighborhood history and demographics, and here's the things that we heard that you're interested in and what your concerns are. And I hope someday there'll be that level of outreach to the neighborhoods again. And I understand that you're short-staffed now and putting out fires and that kind of thing. But it seems like at least there ought to go back to this sort of minimal thing where you're just asking neighborhood associations to submit some things. And that's obviously imperfect because neighborhood associations are not some are not as well organized as others, but anyway, I just hope that you'll try to bake that in a better way than it has been. The citizen survey is great, but it's obviously asking kind of just broad strokes of what people are interested in and not specifics. Yeah. And I think you could get that from the neighborhoods. Thanks.
I appreciate you raising that, Mr. Michi, and and acknowledging that we do have staffing problems. I mean, I have thought about, I've asked staff about, doing, citizen budget summits and things that I've done in places in my past. We just don't have the bandwidth at this time. And it's something that we can work toward in the future as we staff up and solve some of these vacancy issues that we have. And in the immediate period, soliciting feedback from you may be the best we can do, and seeing how we can work that in the process. So it's very present on my mind.
And just know that we do still have the ability to make some changes to the citizen survey and maybe use it in this interim period, even as a better tool for soliciting that kind of feedback. So we have some more work that we can do on that. That won't be as hard to pull off. All right, I see Avon Greenbrier.
Hi, I'm actually Avon Kinley from Greenbrier. Sorry, that was a little
Oh, I'm sorry. Avon
weird
Kinley from
name.
Greenbrier.
That's okay. I just wanted to mention, when the topic of the school reconfiguration came up, I only heard reconfiguring Buford. Is there not funding for renovating Walker to a preschool center and renovating the elementary schools to allow for more space for fifth graders?
At this point, there is no funding for either one of those two things.
Is
Right now,
there
the only thing that's funded is the renovation in Buford.
And is that going to be, they're going to be lending for that, or is there just not a plan yet?
So I know that the schools had presented some options. Some of those were, in the 20s of millions for Walker. I'm not sure that there was a lot of conversation about for the elementary schools. I'm sure that they are working or looking at that. And that, again, that's going to have to be a future discussion with the city council and school board.
Yeah, that will be a future discussion. We know it's coming. When we landed on Buford and the process forward on that, I knew that the school board would be coming back for Walker. So that's just something we're going to have to deal with, when they come back to us.
Okay, thank you.
All right, our last question for this section, Audrey Dannenberg.
Hi, just a question that Ned touched on. If you redo the community survey, could you add a question about suggestions for capital improvement projects to see what people are thinking about?
That's what I'm speaking of.
Yeah,
I think that's
what
the opportunity that we have. Absolutely.
That's
Okay,
right.
thank you.
Thank you. All right, James, I know we have some progress on our work with the comp plan, as well as we had an item from the last meeting regarding the steering committee.
Great, thank you. And I don't have a presentation tonight. Mine is just a quick announcement. Everybody here received email from us with the link to the first report for the zoning rewrite project, which is, as Sam noted, the third phase of our CVille Plans Together process. And that email also announced our upcoming open house. That's a drop-in meeting running from 4 to 8 p.m. at the Ting Pavilion on Monday. So I'm hoping both that people here tonight will have an opportunity to attend and talk with members of our team, but also can share that information out with your communities. We will be validating parking for that meeting, but also encourage people to walk, bike, or otherwise take other means of transportation to get there. The setup for the meeting will be that will be set up in the pavilion under the shelter there with kind of workshop style stations and again, people who can answer questions and talk to you about the content of the report, and there'll be opportunities to share feedback and comments back with the team. And then, as was noted, one of the follow-up items, we had reached out to the group to identify a second person to represent this neighborhood leaders group on the steering committee. And I believe Jonathan Rice volunteered for that position, and that was emailed out by Alex last week. And that's what I have for announcements. There, Jonathan, I see you now. Thank you.
Yeah, let me also, James, take a point of privilege and ask you, take the hot seat again and just speak to our neighborhood leaders on the efforts you've undertaken to try to get us out of our current crunch in NDS as it relates to permits and inspections, since there are some individuals that I'm sure have heard from their neighbors, if not themselves, experience some difficulty with being able to do their home projects.
Sure, yeah, this is, as I'm sure everyone here can imagine, been a real challenge for the department over actually a number of months. Where we are right now is we've just last week signed an agreement with the UVA Building Officials Office to take on some of our plan review and inspections, basically support us in that activity. We're actually getting back our first set of reviewed plans from them tomorrow. And they've been conducting inspections all week, which has helped free up our staff to also contribute towards plan review. Overall, and there's a question in the question and answer sheet that goes into greater depth on this issue, but overall we're working to fill our vacant positions. Thanks to the city manager's office and city council, an additional building inspector staff position has been added, which will help, once we can fill these positions, will help to address the long-term capacity issue that's been an issue for a number of years in the department.
And let me say as well that during this period, we are aware that some citizens have had to use third-party contractors for review of their projects and at their own expense. I've asked staff to evaluate to what extent we can reimburse people for those expenditures. And we haven't landed yet on where we are, but that's where we're thinking. I very much believe that if you have to pay because we are not able to do our jobs, then there ought to be some compensation back for you doing that, and that's the direction that we're looking at. I don't think it's a big group, but I think the gesture is important.
Yeah, and we are working on compiling that information, and pulling together all the third-party inspections that have been done during this time period.
Thank you, James. I just didn't want to miss a moment to at least provide a little more detail as to what we're doing. We understand it's our burden to carry, and we do regret the impact that it's had. So our goal is to get out of this as quickly as we possibly can, while at the same time continuing to work on our other improvement efforts that have been underway since James got here in September of last year. I'm begging him to take a vacation because I need him to stay upright and finish getting this resolved, just so you know.
That's right.
All right, next up is Alex.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to talk to folks today about neighborhood profile survey. A lot of thanks to Ned Michi, and who provided the profile survey. It was sent out to all the community leaders. I've gotten only one survey back. So I take it that some of you are still reviewing it, and would like to see whether you have any concerns or comments regarding the survey. Otherwise, after the meeting today, I will start reinforcing completion of that survey aggressively. One of the things the city is looking at doing with the information is to create some kind of a profile, some kind of a summary profile of all the neighborhoods, and then we have those on the website so that people will be able to access that and look at what the profile of the neighborhood is, especially if you are looking at recruiting membership. So if you have any concerns or comments, we'll be happy to hear that. Otherwise, I'll be reinforcing completion of that survey and then submitting it to myself as well as Ned. I think I'll be coordinating that project with Ned, and if you can help us with completing that survey, that would be appreciated.
Thanks a lot for sending that out, Alex, and for being interested in pursuing it. I really, really appreciate that. And I guess we do need to clarify whether you're collecting them or I'm collecting them. I've gotten 2 responses, but yeah,
Okay.
We need to encourage folks to fill them out and send them in. And you'll see in there's a spot if you don't want to go through all the questions that you can just kind of put a general description of what's going on, because again, I know a lot of organizations are less organized than others. And so, but whatever you can do to fill it out and let us know what's going on, I think it'll really help us understand each other better and how we can help support each other better with learning best practices and whatnot. And so, again, thanks, Alex, for helping to push that on.
And what I'll offer here is I saw this as one of those moments that I would love for us to be able to continue to replicate going forward. I appreciate Mr. Mickey, you deciding that you wanted to take this on. I don't want you to take it on. I want us to take it on.
Well, thank you.
So I volunteered Alex to step in, and ideally, I think it would be appropriate for us to be able to do it, and then to synthesize the information and present it, and let you keep coming up with great ideas for us instead. And then as we start working on some more of these neighborhood related projects for going forward, it really kind of cements the idea that we then can draft some of you to serve in an advisor capacity, but we're working on things. So ideally, if there's something in regards to how we put this thing together, since you have found a real interest in making this happen, then Alex can call on you to kind of bounce some things off of. I'd like to see us do more of that going forward. So that's where it came from for Alex to step in and also offer to recruit or solicit the responses. So you can forward it to him, and he's going to make sure that we get it integrated into our system, and it begins to build out what we imagine is a better neighborhood focused page where all that information can be available for use by anyone.
Great.
James, I see your hand.
Thank you. Yeah, there was one other thing I forgot to mention following on from our last meeting. A number of you provided me with your meeting schedules through the summer. And so I'm working with staff to put together basically my roadshow schedule for this summer in terms of getting out to neighborhood groups and other organizations to talk about the zoning project. I have dates, and I'm going to be reaching out to neighborhoods to confirm these as at least potential dates, I guess, right now. I have dates for the Martha Jefferson neighborhood, the Fifeville neighborhood, 10th and Page, North Downtown, and Belmont Carlton. If there's any others who have dates this summer that you'd like to see if I can get out to you, shoot me an email directly, and we'll see what we can do. So thank you.
Please take us up on an opportunity that even if you don't have a meeting schedule, if you would like to schedule one around this topic, we welcome the opportunity to coordinate that with you. So consider that as well, that you can arrange for a special meeting, and it might be good to check in with James for some options for a few weeks from now if you wanted to do something like that, and then call a meeting around this particular opportunity.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Sam. And I'm also open to combining meetings.
Right, that too.
Yeah.
All right, Bob, I see your hand.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I'm Bob Roach. I'm from the Johnson Village Neighborhood Association. We, and I also actually, for clarity, I work for the city, but I'm here in capacity for our neighborhood. We've been a one-man band with Heather Walker, pretty much representing us for the past few years. We have now a formed neighborhood association with officers. So I'm not sure what we've done, what we've received. If I could get a copy sent to me of that survey, Alex, and I'm not sure whether we have any communication about meetings this summer. I will forward anything I receive on to the full Neighborhood Association Board. But I just wanted to jump in there, and because this is my first meeting for the neighborhood, although I was on the board many years ago, I'm back on it now. I don't know where we stand as far as Johnson Village. So if you could forward that stuff on to me, I would be glad to then take it to our board and we can go from there.
Definitely, I will.
Thank you.
Alex, did you have anything else?
Yeah, just a couple of dates, important dates. The next community leaders meeting is September 15th. We'll be talking about how to access city government. And then December 15th will be our end of year quarterly meeting. And it's pretty important because we are going to discuss what we are going to do for the year 2023 in terms of contents or projects together for that year 2023. So those are the remaining 2 meetings for the year. Thank you.
All right, so this is the portion where we move into the roundtable, and I am going to be working the clock. As we've already discussed, we have shifted to you putting your questions in writing in advance of the meeting and are getting those responses back to you so that we don't have to really take up the meeting just simply answering those questions. What we would like to do is we really, really appreciate the opportunity to hear from you as the leaders of the various neighborhoods. So if you all wanted to begin raising your hands for any comments that you would like to share, things you want to point out, questions that, again, we have limited time, so we don't want to go too far, and we want to make sure that we have an opportunity for every neighborhood to be able to offer something if they want. But this will be your moment that if you'd like to just really report something to us or ask a basic question or express something, we're welcome to hear that from you at this time. If not, I have plenty of things we could talk about. I can start going through them if you want.
Hi, this is Carmelita Feisel, Neighborhood Association. I had sent a question in to Alex. Forgive me, I'm at work on the work phone, so.
No problem. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a question and concern from a neighbor resident. She said her biggest concern is the speeding on Old Fifth Street Southwest. The police department put up a machine that showed each car's speed, which were for the most part cars were speeding. It's really dangerous for us to even get out of the cars we're in when coming down the street. No one has ever gotten back to her about what the plans were for the street. The entire street is really worried about it. And she also wants to know what the city is going to do about the unmaintained islands located on Fifth Street. They look horrible, and she's tired of calling the city to cut them down.
Okay. Well, we'll take that note and we'll dig into that for you. I think that's probably a CPD and a traffic engineer item for us to follow up on. So we will dig into that and see if we can't get a specific answer to you, Ms. Wood, on that one. I'll make sure that Alex gets that information and provide that back to you.
The chief did provide an answer to that in the written response. Perhaps she hasn't seen it yet to both questions. Okay. So you should have that. All right.
Thank you.
Jay, Scott?
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to mention that Sam and James very kindly on very short notice in May, after we had our last meeting, came and did a presentation to a small group of our Venable Neighborhood Association, and they did a great job. I really highly recommend if you can get them to come with your schedules. It's really refreshing to have such great new people on board. So I appreciate y'all's willingness to rearrange your schedules to come talk to us. And there's a lot of positive feedback afterwards.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And again, we welcome that opportunity. So definitely calling us and we'll do our best to get there if we can. All right, I see a phone number with a hand up.
I think I hit it by mistake. This is
Okay,
Carmelita.
no problem.
Sorry.
I know you just want to talk to me, Ms. Wood. That's okay.
Well,
All right, Ethan Tate.
Great, thanks. And likewise, really appreciated both Sam and James coming out to Martha Jefferson to talk about some of our concerns, mostly around the Safe Routes to School program. And this is one of those things. I'm the new president at the Martha Jefferson Neighborhood Association. There might have been some stuff kind of lost in translation with all of the turnover, but it was something that the neighborhood was really excited about kind of in the final months before the pandemic. And then it seems to just kind of have disappeared. And I've tried to follow up as best I know how, but haven't really gotten anywhere with it. And, we recognize that the finances are tight and those things, some of those interventions would cost money, but at least having an update for the neighborhood would be really helpful, because I know there was a lot of enthusiasm, because we are kind of the connector to so many other neighborhoods adjacent for kids going to Burley Marin and also for folks getting over to the pool and Mead Park and all of that. So it seemed like it was something that there wouldn't be any squeaky wheels on, and actually a lot of kind of potential advocates, but we just don't know where it stands right now. So any updates you have now or any follow-up I should do, please let me know.
And I appreciate you stating it that way. It's just causing me now to think about the fact that we are moving so fast and doing so many things that we're missing even our opportunities to give you updates on changes that may be happening and that kind of thing. So good point there. We are making a move in regards to Safe Routes to Schools. Our bike ped coordinator and Safe Routes coordinator both have existed in the most recent transition in the Public Works Engineering Division. They are moving to NDS and they will stay there as a part of our ongoing planning effort. So James is going to be taking responsibility for both of those positions. The bike ped coordinator position is vacant at this time, so we are going to be advertising. And James, make sure I don't say it wrong, what we've been doing, because we've been have so many moving parts, but we're going to be backfilling that position. And then the coordinator is actually going to be joining that person in NDS to be a part of a bigger coordinated transportation team that we have not had before.
As this is a roundtable, I hope you don't mind if we
Go ahead.
Statement. Will that position, for lack of a better word, be an active position, or in terms of moving the city goals forward on a long-term basis, or kind of reactive compared to small plans and small comments that come up?
No, our goal is to absolutely do what you're speaking to. We don't want to be reactive. We want to be thinking forward. James, go ahead. I know you want to say what you've been saying to me.
No, I mean, I'm going to agree with what you were just saying. Yeah, this is about proactively pursuing our goals as we've laid out in the comprehensive plan and in previous work that the city has done. And it's right now it's going to be a 3-person team, as is outlined in the question and answer sheet that we've already distributed. We're aiming to hire the transportation planner first, which will be looking big picture at our overall planning for our transportation program, and the bike ped coordinator position will come in under that, and the Safe Routes to School person will be part of that team as well.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
And then we are also adding a project manager with the focus specifically on ADA. That speaks to your sidewalks priorities, because we recognize how often that comes up on our list of questions. That too then gives us a person in the project management space to continue to move those forward and to then be able to provide updates, because we're trying to figure out how best to keep those updates flowing for you as well.
When we received that, what seemed to be the final plan pre-pandemic, it seemed like some of those changes on the Safe Routes plan were kind of imminent. Is it safe to say that none of that will be happening before the start of the school year, in terms of like implementation until these staff positions are filled?
I don't know that I can give you a good answer on that one. James and I haven't had a moment to actually take a look at that with this transition that we're currently planning. I think we can take a look at that and provide a follow-up response to you on what we think. I appreciate you pointing that out. I think the position went vacant in January, so it's been a few months since we haven't had anyone to actually be pushing anything in this current year. Chances are that we're probably not going to meet expectations if there are any specifically for this school year coming. But there might be some things that we can at least give you an update on as to where we think they could fall in prioritizing these new hires and how soon we can get to them. All right, anyone else? All right, your turn, Mr. Mickey. I see you.
I'll just take a moment to mention that before the pandemic, there was questions. There's, everybody in all the neighborhoods, streets are complaining about speeding in their neighborhood, that's just a constant and always will be a constant thing. And the traffic engineer mentioned that you all were looking at getting mobile radar signs, not the type on wheel, but the type that you can strap on utility poles so that it can go in tight places on roads that the mobile one can't, and so that you can move it around to different places. And I assume that hasn't happened, and I would just encourage the city to look into that, and assuming those are products out there that you can get mobile signs that can be moved. And I would think the city would want more of those, frankly, because it's just a constant thing you'll hear from us in the neighborhood. Thanks.
So I will say that I'm sure that Mr. Smalls wrote that one down, but I do know that we have made some orders on some various traffic management items, but they are on back order because of the supply chain issue. I'm not exactly sure if that is a part of that order, but we will definitely check into it and we can let you know where that stands at this moment. And because it now triggers another update. So we have had 2 people in traffic engineering for quite some time. We will soon have 3 people in traffic engineering, so adding capacity there as well. In addition to the traffic engineer and filling the vacant assistant traffic engineer, we're adding a traffic inspector. And that'll be an individual who will be able to do more of that assessment work that you're describing as well. So I do think that we are working towards getting to a place of being able to do more of this management of traffic. So we hope that that'll be one of the fruits of this particular decision that's been made as well in this current budget. So in FY23, it'll be 3 positions instead of 2. I see the thumbs up, Stacy. Nothing else. All right. Anyone else?
I think you described it very well. So once we get our manpower up, we'll be able to accomplish a whole lot more as you just described.
Okay.
I had a question along the lines of the speeding from Mr. Mickey. A few years ago, we had requested a 4-way stop at one of the intersections in our neighborhood. And the 2 things on this. The idea of speed humps came up, and we were told we didn't really want them, but we were also told by the city that the city was not going to be putting in any more speed humps because of the EMS request, because it slows down the emergency services vehicles. But the other thing we were told was that the reason we weren't, it kind of fell through the cracks, but one of the reasons why it fell through the cracks was we were told that the amount of traffic did not warrant a 4-way stop. And I'm curious, my question is that the only criteria? Because for us, it wasn't about amount of traffic or volume of traffic, it was about safety. A lot of kids in our neighborhood, a lot of dog walkers, strollers, and people speeding. I'm curious if that could be considered as something that might allow us to pursue a 4-way stop versus a 2-way stop.
Give me the specific intersection just so that we know.
Trail Ridge and Shamrock in Johnson Village. And there's 2 intersections. One's a 3-way, but one's a 4-way. I'm referencing the 4-way stop.
what I'll do is I can check to see what's been done. What I do understand is that anytime we look at these things, we do a traffic study. So there is a collection of data that has to occur in order for us to evaluate what the right action is. That it is correct that we are resisting the installation of speed humps because it does interfere with emergency response. It also does damage to cars that then exposes the city to additional risk. That's part of it. I mean, usually those are speeders, but that's what happens.
Right.
But we have to do more in the way of identifying additional traffic calming opportunities. And I think that's why James has prioritized his recommendation to me for adding this transportation planner. That's an example of the kind of thing that they need to be able to take on and expend some energy there, and then bring those types of things into the conversation with the traffic engineer who ultimately makes the decision on how we configure those different approaches to intersections. But I'm going to check on this particular intersection and see. Usually it's also, traffic studies are dated over time. And if nothing has happened, we have to do them again so that we have fresh information. If there's a need to do one, we can put it on the list, and that'll be something we'll get to once we get those all 3 staff positions filled and we have the capacity to do another study.
Yeah, I think it fell through the cracks from both sides, from our end on the neighborhood as well as on the city side. So that was kind of a mutual thing and it's been a few years since that was requested. So I'm pretty sure we'll have to start from scratch.
All right, well, we'll take a look at that, and Alex will get a response back to you.
Cool, thanks.
Anyone else? Got a few more minutes left. I think I should rename this section Stump Sam and see if you can figure out a way to stop me from having to answer for you. All right, William, you can go again.
Oh, I got one for you. Neighbors, one of the questions was about composting. I think one of the other leaders put in, and thank you for the answer for that. At one time, a suggestion was out about neighborhood level composting pickups. As the city improves its outreach and communication with neighborhood associations, that might be a feasible. We're just curious if that would be a feasible item to increase the number of drop-off spots in the city that could still be manageably picked up. Just putting it out there.
That didn't stump me, but what I'll say is I definitely see that from a manpower perspective, that is one that we can't necessarily agree to in the short term. But it is something that we could probably take a look at. We have had a recent conversation about recycling and what that could call for. So that then gives us the ability to consider this as an additional aspect of the change to service. I think right now we are not ready to be able to commit to anything. There's still some evaluation going on. We haven't had a public service manager for quite some time. Mr. Smalls is close to wrapping up that selection as we speak, and then we'll move into then being able to fully assess that division. That's where we would be able to take on an ability to expand any current service and or reprioritize contracts that we have today to add additional services.
Okay. Well, then my real stumper would be, what are the odds that we could get a transit center west at Barracks Road to facilitate east-west and north-south transfers to increase? And what do you think about that idea?
Sam?
I like the idea. So you didn't stop me. I like the idea. That's a big one. I'll say to you that it's probably more possible than you might think. There's a lot of federal funding coming that we are trying to make sure that we are poised to take advantage of. Our transit area has not had an issue with being able to secure funds. The funds are always in this particular pipeline viewed as one-time funds because we're not guaranteed to get the same amount every single year, and they come for different reasons. They tend to come with a lot of conditions. But that is a part of a larger transit vision that is currently being studied and evaluated right now. We have so much work that we're doing actually in conjunction with the county that it makes sense for us to start looking at where are additional hub opportunities so that we can better manage the routes. Mr. Rogers actually had an opportunity to go to CAT with me to hear a presentation on the current performance of our routes. And we have a lot of work to do in improving our current network. And part of the answer for that is going to be additional abilities for us to do transfers beyond having everybody come to the downtown transit center as the place to do that. So I'll say your idea is a good one. It is one that is on the table. I can't say it's on the table for sooner as a soon proposition, but it's one that is being considered right now as the consultants are working with us as we look to try to figure out how CAT can be a broader regional, even a regional authority at some point. That would mean that there'd probably be more than just one more location for something like that.
Thank you for that answer. And I'll say it again, you guys are doing a great job. We can see the city getting up to speed. Keep up the good work, all the city staff. They're on this call and beyond.
Thank you. All right, we have 4 minutes left. I love ending on what you just said there. Thank you. We appreciate the support and we're trying to do better. But if there's anyone else that has just something that's burning, 4 minutes to go.
As we close out, I just want to thank all of the participants for being on tonight, for the discussion. We get better when we hear from you and understand your issues, and it's very much appreciated that you've taken the time to do this, and we look forward to future dialogue as well.
Thank you all. We do, again, appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at the September 15th meeting. Alex will be in touch with the request for your questions, and we'll get those answers back to you ahead of the meeting. And then the items that we took notes on for tonight, we'll make sure that we feed those responses back to Alex so that he can add them and redistribute the Q&A for you. Okay, thank you all.
Yes, sir. This is Carmelita. Just want to thank you all for a well-organized meeting.
Thank you, ma'am. All right.
Good night.
Have a good night. Y'all have a safe 4th of July as well. Take care.